The lawyer's office felt suffocating. Margaret sat across from us, her hands folded primly over her designer handbag, face arranged in practiced grief. My husband Daniel squeezed my hand as the lawyer cleared his throat. The estate of Robert Chen is valued at approximately $3.2 million, Mr. Patterson announced. Per his will, everything goes to his wife, Margaret Chen. Daniel's grip tightened. His father had promised him differently. We'd had conversations about it. Robert wanted to ensure Daniel and I were secure that our future children would have college funds. He'd specifically mentioned setting money aside for us. Everything? Daniel's voice cracked. Dad told me he'd arranged for me to receive something. We discussed it 6 months ago. Margaret's expression didn't change. Your father changed his mind, apparently. Everything comes to me, as it should. I was his wife for 40 years. But Mom, he specifically said. Your father said many things. Her tone went cold. The will is clear. Mr. Patterson, are we finished? I watched Margaret leave, her Chanel heels clicking against marble floors. Something felt wrong. Robert had been adamant about providing for Daniel. He'd even mentioned a trust fund he'd established years ago. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Neither could I. Because I'd seen something in Margaret's eyes that wasn't grief. It was triumph. Robert's funeral had been 3 weeks ago. The kind, gentle man who'd welcomed me into their family with open arms was gone. He treated me like a daughter from the moment Daniel introduced us, often taking my side when Margaret made her subtle criticisms. Margaret had never warmed to me. I wasn't the society girl she'd envisioned for her son. I was a social worker from a working-class family, educated on scholarships and student loans. To Margaret, that made me unsuitable despite Daniel's insistence that I was exactly who he wanted. She's rewriting history, Daniel said, staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. Dad was clear. He told me there was money set aside in my name. He said he'd made sure we'd be taken care of. Could he have changed his mind without telling you? My father didn't work that way. He was meticulous about financial planning. Daniel rolled to face me. Sarah, something's not right. Dad wouldn't have left me with nothing after those conversations. I'd met Robert only 3 years ago, but I'd grown to love him. He'd been genuinely excited about our wedding, about the possibility of grandchildren. He talked often about legacy, about ensuring his family's future security. What do you want to do? I asked quietly. I don't know. Challenge the will? That would destroy what's left of my relationship with my mother. That relationship was already strained. Margaret blamed me for Daniel choosing social work over law, for us living modestly instead of pursuing wealth. 2 days later, Margaret invited us to the house to collect Robert's personal effects. The mansion in Greenwich felt empty without Robert's warmth. He'd always greeted us at the door with hugs and jokes. Now Margaret stood stiffly in the foyer, gesturing toward boxes she'd already packed. I've sorted through your father's clothing and personal items. Take what you want. Her tone suggested we were doing her a favor by removing clutter. Daniel moved through the house like a ghost, touching furniture, looking at photos. I followed, watching Margaret watch us with hawk-like attention. She tracked our movements, especially when Daniel lingered near Robert's study. That room is off-limits, she said sharply when Daniel reached for the study door. I'm sorting through business papers. It's too overwhelming right now. Mom, I just want to see. I said no, Daniel. Her voice carried authority that made him step back. Respect my grief. I'll let you know when the study is ready. Something in her desperation to keep us out confirmed my suspicions. Robert had kept meticulous files in that study. If there was evidence of a trust fund or alternate arrangements, it would be there. We left with a box of Robert's watches and some photo albums. In the car, Daniel was silent. I could see him processing, calculating, trying to reconcile the father he knew with the will that had been read. We need to get into that study, I said finally. Margaret had always hosted a weekly bridge club every Thursday afternoon. Robert had complained about it fondly, for hours of gossip and cards that took over the living room. I'd attended once and vowed never again after Margaret's friends spent the entire time making pointed comments about my sensible shoes and department store dress. She'll be distracted Thursday afternoon, I told Daniel. That's our window. Sarah, you're talking about breaking into my mother's house. I'm talking about looking for documents your father specifically told you existed. Documents that should have been disclosed during will reading. I kept my voice calm. If there's nothing there, we'll know he changed his mind. But if there is something. She hid it. Daniel finished the thought. You really think she'd do that? I thought about Margaret's cold eyes in the lawyer's office, her triumph when she realized she'd gotten everything. Yes. I think she would. We planned carefully. I'd call Margaret Thursday afternoon with a question about Robert's watch collection, keeping her on the phone. Daniel would slip in through the back door. Robert had given him a key years ago that Margaret didn't know about. He'd have maybe 20 minutes to search the study. Thursday arrived with perfect spring weather. I made the call at 2:15, right when Bridge Club would be in full swing. Margaret, I'm so sorry to bother you. I found an inscription inside one of Robert's watches and I'm wondering if you know the story behind it. Margaret's irritation was audible. I'm with my Bridge Club, Sarah. Can this wait? Of course, I just thought you might want to know which watch has sentimental value. I'd hate to donate something important. I kept my tone apologetic, helpless. She sighed heavily. What does the inscription say? I'd prepared a completely fictional inscription, spinning a story that required Margaret to search her memory and tell lengthy stories about Robert's career. Behind her voice, I could hear her friends chatting, ice clinking in glasses. Daniel texted, I'm in. I kept Margaret talking, asking follow-up questions, expressing interest in stories I'd heard before. She warmed slightly. Margaret loved being the authority on her husband's life, even in death. The study is locked, Daniel texted. Looking for key. Oh, that reminds me, I said to Margaret. Daniel mentioned Robert kept some old law school mementos in his study. Should we look there for personal items? The study is private, Margaret said sharply. I've already told Daniel it's off limits until I've finished sorting. Of course, I understand. It must be so difficult going through everything alone. Daniel texted, found key in desk drawer. Going in. I stretched the conversation another 10 minutes, my heart pounding. Finally, Margaret said her friends were waiting and she had to go. I texted Daniel immediately, she's off the phone. Hurry. 5 agonizing minutes passed. Then, found something. Coming out. Daniel arrived home pale and shaking, clutching a folder. Sarah, you were right. There's a safe in the study. Behind a painting, like something from a movie. It was open. I think Dad opened it before he died and never closed it properly. He spread papers across our kitchen table. Bank statements. Legal documents. And a trust fund agreement dated 5 years ago, establishing a $1.5 million trust in Daniel's name, accessible upon Robert's death. She knew, Daniel whispered. Mom knew about this and kept it hidden. She lied to the lawyer, lied to me, acted like Dad left me nothing when he'd actually set aside half his estate for me. I read through the documents carefully. The trust was legitimate, established with a private wealth management firm, with clear stipulations about distribution. Robert had even written a letter, sealed in an envelope addressed to Daniel. Open it, I urged gently. Daniel's hands trembled as he broke the seal. Robert's handwriting filled 2 pages, explaining his decision to create the trust, his love for Daniel, his hopes for our future. But the final paragraph made Daniel gasp. If you're reading this, and Margaret hasn't informed you about the trust, know that I've taken precautions. The wealth management firm has instructions to contact you directly if they don't hear from you within 90 days of my death. She can hide the documents, but she can't hide the money forever. Trust yourself, son. And trust Sarah. She sees clearly what others miss. Robert had known. Somehow, he'd anticipated that Margaret might try to hide the trust. The realization made my throat tight. He'd protected Daniel from beyond the grave, building in safeguards against his own wife's greed. The 90 days aren't up yet, I said, checking the date of death. We're at day 72. Margaret has 18 more days before the firm would have contacted you anyway. She was going to keep it secret as long as possible. Daniel's voice was hollow. Maybe she thought the firm would just give up, or that I'd never find out. What kind of person does that? I thought about Margaret's coldness at the will reading, her satisfaction when she thought she'd gotten everything. Someone who values money over family. We spent the evening researching. The trust documents were solid, legally binding. The wealth management firm, Sterling and Associates, had an impeccable reputation. Robert had chosen well, establishing the trust with a company that would execute his wishes regardless of Margaret's interference. We need to contact Sterling directly, I said. Confirm everything, start the distribution process. And Daniel, we need to confront your mother. She'll deny everything. Say she didn't know, that the safe was locked, that she never saw these documents. Maybe. But your father's letter proves he anticipated this. That's going to be hard for her to explain away. I held his hand across the table. You deserve this money. Your father wanted you to have it. Don't let her guilt you into walking away. Friday morning, Daniel called Sterling and Associates. The receptionist transferred him immediately to Richard Sterling himself, who'd personally managed Robert's account for years. Daniel, I've been expecting your call. Though I admit I'm surprised it took this long. Richard's voice was warm but professional. I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was a remarkable man. Thank you. Mr. Sterling, I just discovered documents about a trust fund. My mother never mentioned it. A pause. I see. Daniel, your father anticipated potential complications. He left very specific instructions. Can you come to our office today? We should discuss this in person. We drove to Manhattan, to Sterling's office in a building overlooking Central Park. Richard Sterling was 60-ish, gray-haired, with kind eyes that reminded me of Robert. Your father established this trust 5 years ago, Richard explained, spreading documents across his conference table. He was very clear about his wishes. The money was to be distributed to you upon his death, with no restrictions or conditions. Just a straight transfer. Why didn't you contact me after he died? Daniel asked. We sent notification to the address he provided, your current apartment. It would have arrived. He checked his records, this week, actually. We allow 90 days for family matters to settle before initiating contact. Your father was specific about that timeline. I pulled out our mail from the last few days, suddenly remembering a thick envelope I'd assumed was junk mail. There it was, Sterling and Associates, official notification about the trust fund, distribution instructions, everything we'd need. Margaret must have been counting on you not opening it, Richard said quietly. Or perhaps she hoped to convince you it was a mistake, or somehow invalid. But Daniel, this trust is ironclad. Your father made absolutely sure of that. He walked us through everything. The $1.5 million was currently in a diversified portfolio, earning steady returns. Distribution could happen immediately, or Daniel could leave it invested and draw income. The choice was entirely his. Your father also left this. Richard handed Daniel another sealed envelope. He gave it to me personally, with instructions to provide it only after you'd confirmed the trust details. He said you'd understand why after reading it. We waited until we were in the car to open it. This letter was shorter, but devastating. Daniel, if you're reading this at Sterling's office, Margaret has done what I feared. She's hidden the trust, hoping to keep everything for herself. I'm sorry, son. I loved your mother, but I also knew her weaknesses. Money matters more to her than honesty. Protect yourself. Protect Sarah. And know that I wanted you to build a life free from financial worry. Use this gift wisely. Love always, Dad. Daniel cried then, grief and anger mixing together. That evening, we drove to Greenwich for the confrontation. Margaret answered the door in tennis whites, clearly not expecting us. Daniel, Sarah, what are you doing here? We need to talk, Mom. Inside. Something in Daniel's tone made her step back. We followed her into the living room where I'd felt so unwelcome countless times before. Now I saw it differently, expensive furniture, original artwork, luxury built on secrets and lies. We found Dad's trust fund documents, Daniel said without preamble. The $1.5 million he set aside for me. The trust you never mentioned. Margaret's face went carefully blank. I don't know what you're talking about. Stop lying. Daniel's voice was steel. We found the safe in the study. We have the documents. We've been to Sterling and Associates and confirmed everything. Dad established a trust fund in my name 5 years ago. You knew about it and you hid it. That's absurd. If there was a trust, the lawyers would have mentioned it during the will reading. But her hands trembled slightly, giving away her nerves. I pulled out Robert's letter, the one he'd left with Richard Sterling. Your husband anticipated this. He wrote multiple letters explaining exactly what you'd do. He knew you'd hide the trust. That's why he built in safeguards. Margaret's composure cracked. He had no right to give away our money. I was his wife. I earned that money through 40 years of marriage. He didn't give away your money, Daniel said quietly. The will reading was accurate. You inherited $1.6 million plus the house and other assets. Dad made sure you'd be comfortable. But he also made sure I'd have something. That's not unreasonable. You don't understand what I sacrificed for your father's career. The social obligations, the dinner parties, maintaining appearances. That money is mine. Margaret's voice rose, the careful society mask slipping completely. It's not yours. Dad legally established a trust that you can't touch. We're not here to ask permission, Mom. We're here to tell you we know what you did. Daniel stood. You chose money over your relationship with your son. That's something you'll have to live with. Daniel, wait. Margaret's desperation showed now. We can work this out. The trust money can stay in your name, but we could make decisions together. I could help you invest it properly. No. The word was final. You lied to me. You sat in that lawyer's office and watched me grieve, knowing you were hiding money Dad specifically wanted me to have. You're not getting access to any of it. We left her standing in that expensive living room, surrounded by the luxury she'd valued over honesty. In the car, Daniel was shaking, but his voice was steady. I'm done. No more pretending we have a normal mother-son relationship. I drove home while he processed, his phone buzzing repeatedly with texts from Margaret. Apologies, excuses, justifications, threats, the full cycle of manipulation. The next week brought a legal letter from Margaret's attorney, contesting the trust's validity. Richard Sterling called immediately. Don't worry. This is expected. The trust is airtight. I've seen Margaret's arguments and there's no legal basis. She's trying to intimidate you into settling. What kind of settlement would she want? I asked. Probably asking you to give her a percentage of the trust in exchange for dropping the challenge. It's a common tactic. Richard's voice was calm. My advice? Ignore it. Let our lawyers respond. The trust will hold up in any court. Daniel authorized Richard to handle everything. We focused on our lives, on processing grief that was now complicated by betrayal. Friends and family called with condolences about Robert's death, unaware of the drama unfolding behind the scenes. My mother, when I finally told her everything, was horrified. That woman sat at your wedding and smiled at you, knowing she'd already decided you weren't good enough. And now this? Daniel's better off without her. Mom was right, but it didn't make the situation less painful. Daniel had lost his father and his mother in the span of a month, one to death, one to greed. 2 weeks after the legal letter, Margaret called Daniel directly. "We need to talk. In person. Just you and me. Mom, anything you want to say can be said in front of Sarah. Please, Daniel. Give me a chance to explain. Let me take you to lunch." Against my better judgment, Daniel agreed. I dropped him off at an upscale restaurant in Greenwich, watching him walk in to meet a mother who'd chosen money over him. He returned 2 hours later, exhausted and sad. She tried every manipulation tactic. Tears, anger, playing victim, guilt-tripping. When none of that worked, she offered me a deal. What kind of deal? She'll drop the legal challenge if I give her $500,000 from the trust. She claims she needs it for unexpected expenses and that Dad would want me to help her. Daniel laughed bitterly. She has $1.6 million from the inheritance. She doesn't need my money. She just can't stand that I have something she can't control. What did you say? I said no. I told her the trust is mine, that Dad wanted me to have it, and that her greed is destroying whatever relationship we had left. He looked at me with red eyes. She said if I don't give her the money, she'll cut me out of her life completely. No contact, no relationship, nothing. I pulled him close. I'm sorry. That's a horrible ultimatum. It's not really an ultimatum though. She's already cut me out by lying and hiding the trust. This is just her making official what she already chose. He pulled back, wiping his eyes. I choose us, Sarah. I choose building our own family with honest foundations. I can't have a relationship with someone who values money over her own son. The next day, Daniel's lawyer sent Margaret's lawyer a formal response: no settlement, no negotiation, no contact. The trust would be distributed per Robert's wishes, and any further legal challenges would be countered aggressively. Margaret's legal challenge was dismissed within a month. The judge barely looked at her arguments before ruling that the trust was properly established and entirely legal. Daniel received a formal apology from Margaret's lawyer. Apparently she'd misrepresented facts to him, and he'd been unaware of the actual situation. The $1.5 million was transferred to accounts in Daniel's name. We sat in Richard Sterling's office, signing final papers, watching numbers appear on screens that represented security, freedom, and Robert's love. Your father would be proud, Richard said quietly. He wanted you to have options, to build the life you wanted without financial pressure. That's a precious gift. We paid off our student loans first. $180,000 gone in a single transaction, debts that had hung over us for years suddenly erased. Then we bought a house, not a mansion like Margaret's, but a comfortable 3-bedroom in a good neighborhood with excellent schools. Daniel set up college funds for the children we hoped to have. We invested the rest conservatively, creating steady income that supplemented our social work salaries and allowed us to work in meaningful careers without financial stress. This is what Dad wanted, Daniel said, walking through our new house. Not luxury or showing off. Just security and freedom to do work we love. I thought about Robert often. The way he'd welcomed me into the family, defended me against Margaret's subtle criticisms, talked about the grandchildren he'd never meet. He'd seen his wife's nature clearly and protected his son from it. That was real love. 6 months after Robert's death, we ran into Margaret at a charity gala. Daniel's work colleague had invited us, not knowing his mother would be there. We saw her across the room, holding court among her society friends, looking perfectly composed in designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She saw us too. For a moment, something flickered across her face, regret, maybe, or longing. Then her expression hardened and she deliberately turned away, continuing her conversation as if we didn't exist. That's her choice, Daniel murmured, squeezing my hand. We offered relationship. She chose money. We stayed at the gala, refused to be driven away by Margaret's presence. Several people approached Daniel, offering condolences about Robert, praising his father's generosity and kindness. Each conversation was a reminder of what Robert had been and what Margaret had lost by prioritizing greed. An older woman, one of Robert's former colleagues, pulled Daniel aside. Your father talked about you constantly. He was so proud of the man you'd become, of your choice to do meaningful work instead of chasing money. He said you reminded him of why he'd gone into law in the first place, to help people, not to accumulate wealth. He never told me that, Daniel said, voice thick. He planned to. He told me a month before he died that he was going to share some important things with you, about his own choices and regrets. I think he wanted to explain the trust fund, why he'd set it up. She squeezed Daniel's arm. He loved you more than anything. We left the gala early, both of us emotionally drained from seeing Margaret. At home, Daniel pulled out the letters from Robert, rereading them for perhaps the 20th time since we'd found them. He knew exactly who she was, Daniel said. He loved her anyway, but he didn't trust her with my future. How sad is that? 40 years of marriage and he had to protect his son from his own wife. Maybe that's why he waited until later in life to establish the trust. Maybe he hoped she'd change, or that he was wrong about her. I sat beside him. But when he got sick, when he realized he was running out of time, he had to act. Robert had died of a sudden heart attack, unexpected, shocking, no time for final words or goodbyes. But he'd prepared anyway, leaving letters and legal protections because he'd understood that time was never guaranteed. I want to be like him, Daniel said. Generous, thoughtful, always thinking about how to take care of the people I love. Not like her, always calculating what I can get, what I can control. We talked late into the night about the kind of parents we wanted to be, the kind of legacy we wanted to leave. Not money necessarily, though we'd use Robert's gift to provide for our children. But values, integrity, love that showed up in actions, not just words. Your father's real inheritance wasn't the money, I said finally. It was the example he set. That's what you'll pass on. Daniel pulled me close. With you beside me, I think I can do that. A year after Robert's death, we learned I was pregnant. The news came with joy mixed with sadness. Our child would never meet their grandfather, never experience Robert's warmth and wisdom firsthand. But they'd know him through stories, through the security his planning provided, through the values he'd instilled in Daniel. We didn't tell Margaret. She'd send a Christmas card, no personal message, just a printed greeting and her signature, but otherwise maintained her self-imposed exile from Daniel's life. Her choice remained clear, money mattered more than grandchildren. She'll regret it, my mother said when we shared the pregnancy news with my family. Someday she'll realize what she gave up, and it'll be too late. Maybe. Or maybe Margaret was so focused on wealth and status that she genuinely couldn't see the value in relationships. Some people were wired that way, measuring everything by financial metrics because they didn't know how else to calculate worth. We prepared for the baby in the house Robert's trust had helped us buy, in the financial security his planning had provided. Every decision, the nursery furniture, the education savings account, the decision that I'd take a full year of maternity leave, was possible because of Robert's foresight. Thank you, I whispered sometimes, standing in the nursery, feeling the baby kick. Thank you for seeing me, for protecting Daniel, for giving us this. I felt Robert's presence in those moments, like he was somehow watching over us, pleased that his careful planning had given his son and daughter-in-law the freedom to live without financial fear. Our daughter was born on a spring morning, perfect and healthy. We named her Claire, after no one in particular, just a name we both loved. But her middle name was Roberta, feminine version of Robert, ensuring his name would carry forward. Daniel cried holding her, overwhelmed by love and grief tangled together. I wish Dad could meet her. He'd have been such a good grandfather. He'll meet her through you. You'll teach her the things he taught you. I stroked Claire's soft hair. She'll know him through stories and values. That's a kind of immortality. My parents visited, bringing gifts and joy. Daniel's father's siblings came, marveling at the baby, sharing stories about Robert as a young father. The house filled with love and laughter, family supporting family the way it should be. Margaret sent a card, congratulations, nothing personal, a check for $500 that felt more like obligation than love. Daniel deposited it in Claire's college fund without comment. The money would serve Claire eventually, even if the grandmother wouldn't. Do you think she'll ever reach out? I asked one night, both of us exhausted from newborn duties. Try to have a relationship with Claire? Honestly? I don't know. Part of me hopes she will, that she'll realize what she's missing. But another part of me is okay, if she doesn't. Claire deserves family who shows up unconditionally, not someone who values money over relationships. I understood. It was a complicated grief, mourning the mother-in-law relationship I'd never really had, the grandmother relationship Claire might never have, but also accepting that some losses were self-inflicted and couldn't be fixed by the people who'd been hurt. When Claire was 6 months old, Richard Sterling called requesting a meeting. Nothing wrong, he assured us quickly. But there's something I need to share with you. Something Robert left with instructions to reveal after his first grandchild was born. We met at his office, Claire in her carrier, both of us curious and slightly nervous. Richard smiled at the baby, then pulled out yet another envelope. Your father thought of everything, Richard said to Daniel. He prepared this 2 years ago, after you and Sarah got married. He said to give it to you only after your first child was born, because then you'd truly understand his motivations. The letter was longer than the others, written in Robert's familiar careful handwriting. Dear Daniel and Sarah, if you're reading this, you have a child now. You understand the overwhelming love that makes you want to protect them from everything, to ensure their security, to build a foundation they can stand on. That's how I felt about you, Daniel. The trust fund wasn't about money, it was about giving you freedom. Freedom to choose meaningful work over lucrative careers. Freedom to take risks, to fail, to try again. Freedom to marry for love instead of financial security. The letter continued, explaining Robert's own regrets. He'd married Margaret partly for her family connections, building his career on networking and strategy. He'd been financially successful but emotionally hollow for years, realizing too late that status couldn't replace genuine connection. I don't want that life for you, Robert had written. I want you to have what I found late, a real love, purposeful work, authentic relationships. The money is just a tool to make that possible. Use it to build something real. And please, teach my grandchildren that wealth is measured in love given and received, not in bank accounts. Daniel was crying, Claire fussing in response to her father's emotion. I took the baby, letting him process this final gift from Robert, not money, but permission. Permission to live differently, to value differently, to measure success by different metrics than his mother did. He gave you freedom, Richard said quietly. The rarest gift a parent can give. Freedom to be fully yourself without financial fear holding you back. We left Richard's office understanding more deeply why Robert had structured everything the way he had. The trust wasn't just about money. It was about breaking free from the values Margaret represented, appearances over authenticity, wealth over relationships, control over love. That evening, we updated our own wills, making sure Claire would inherit not just money but values. We wrote letters to be opened when she was older, explaining why we'd made certain choices, what we hoped she'd understand about meaningful living. We're passing on Dad's real legacy, Daniel said, watching Claire sleep. The money helps, but the values matter more. I thought about Margaret, alone in her mansion, surrounded by expensive things but isolated from the family she'd pushed away. She had more money than Daniel, but she'd paid for it with relationships. That seemed like the worst trade imaginable. Claire's first birthday brought extended family together again, my parents, Daniel's aunts and uncles, close friends who'd become chosen family. The house overflowed with love and laughter, with people who showed up because they wanted to, not out of obligation or calculation. Margaret sent another card, another impersonal check. No request to visit, no expression of interest in her granddaughter's life. Daniel barely reacted anymore, he'd accepted that his mother had made her choice and no amount of hoping would change it. She doesn't know what she's missing, Daniel's aunt said, watching Claire demolish her first birthday cake. This child is surrounded by people who love her. Margaret's the one losing out. It was true, but still sad. I watched Daniel with Claire, patient, playful, fully present, and saw Robert's influence in every interaction. The trust fund had given them financial security, but Robert's example had given Daniel a template for being a good father. What do you think your dad would say if he could see her? I asked Daniel later, after guests had left and Claire was asleep, frosting still smeared in her hair. He'd say she's perfect. That we're doing great. That he's proud of us for building something real. Daniel smiled. And he'd probably make some joke about Claire's cake-eating style being genetic, since I apparently did the same thing at my first birthday. We'd heard that story from Robert's sister, how Robert had let baby Daniel completely destroy his first birthday cake while Margaret had been horrified by the mess. Different values, even then. Robert had seen joy in the chaos. Margaret had seen only disorder. When Claire was 18 months old, we got a call from Margaret's housekeeper, Rosa. Mrs. Chun is in the hospital. She had a stroke. She's asking for Daniel. We rushed to Greenwich Hospital, finding Margaret in a private room, looking smaller and older than I remembered. The stroke had been mild, doctors said, but it had scared her. Confronted with mortality, she'd asked for her son. Daniel. Her voice was weak, slightly slurred from the stroke. Thank you for coming. Of course, Mom. You're still my mother. He pulled a chair beside her bed, taking her hand carefully. She stared at him for a long moment, tears sliding down her cheeks. I've been so stupid. So focused on money that I pushed away the only thing that actually mattered. Your father tried to tell me. He said I was making a mistake, that I'd regret choosing money over you. I didn't believe him. Mom. Let me finish. Please. She gripped his hand. I saw photos of Claire. Rosa showed me, she follows Sarah on social media. Your daughter is beautiful. And I've missed her entire first year because I was too proud, too stubborn, too focused on money I don't even need. Daniel looked at me, unsure. I nodded slightly. This was his decision, his mother, his call whether to offer forgiveness. I can't give you back the last 2 years, Margaret continued. I can't undo the lies or the greed. But I can try to do better going forward, if you'll let me. If Sarah will let me. We left the hospital promising to think about it. In the car, Daniel was quiet, processing. What do you think? He finally asked. Should we give her a chance? That depends. Do you think she's actually changed, or is she just scared because she had a health crisis? I kept my voice neutral, not wanting to push him either direction. I don't know. She sounded genuine. But she sounded genuine before, then reverted to manipulation. He stared out the window. What would Dad want? Your dad protected you from her greed. But he also loved her for 40 years. He must have seen something worth loving underneath the obsession with money. We talked for hours that night, weighing hurt against hope, protection against possibility. Finally, Daniel decided, we'll give her a chance. Limited contact at first. She can video chat with Claire, maybe visit supervised. But if she reverts to manipulation or tries to control things, we're done. One chance, clear boundaries. I supported his decision. Everyone deserved the opportunity to change, to do better. Whether Margaret would actually follow through remained to be seen. The first video call was awkward. Margaret, still recovering, cried seeing Claire on screen. She looks like Daniel did at that age. Same eyes, same smile. Claire, being a toddler, was more interested in pressing buttons on the phone than her grandmother. But it was a start, tentative, careful, both sides testing whether reconciliation was possible. Over the next months, Margaret made genuine efforts. She attended therapy, working through her issues with money and control. She sent thoughtful gifts for Claire, not expensive designer things, but age-appropriate toys and books. She asked about our lives with what seemed like real interest. I'm selling the Greenwich house, Margaret announced during one video call. It's too big, too expensive to maintain, and too full of memories. I'm buying a smaller place in Westchester. Closer to you, if you'll allow me to visit. Daniel and I exchanged glances. Mom, that's a big change. I'm making a lot of changes. I've also been volunteering at a women's shelter, helping with financial literacy classes. Your father always wanted me to do more with my time than shop and play bridge. He said I had a good mind for numbers and could help people. I'm finally listening. The changes seemed real, sustained over months rather than temporary reactions to crisis. Margaret started therapy with a counselor who specialized in family dynamics and money issues. She attended a support group for people struggling with materialism and status addiction. I'm learning that I built my identity around things I owned and people I impressed, she told us during one visit. When Robert died and I thought I might lose half the money, I panicked. I couldn't see past the dollars to what I was actually losing, my relationship with my son. We introduced her to Claire in person carefully, watching for signs of the old Margaret, the criticism, the attempts to control, the subtle put-downs. But she was different. Softer. She sat on our living room floor, playing with Claire, not caring that her expensive slacks were getting wrinkled or that her hair was messed up. She's perfect, Margaret said, watching Claire stack blocks. Thank you for letting me know her. You're her grandmother, Daniel said. If you're really committed to change, we want her to have a relationship with you. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I know I have to earn that. I'm prepared to do the work. 2 years after Robert's death, we all stood at his grave on the anniversary. Margaret, Daniel, me, and Claire, now active 3-year-old who talked constantly and asked endless questions. Who is this, Mama? Claire pointed at Robert's headstone. This is your grandfather Robert. He loved your daddy very much, and he would have loved you too. I lifted her so she could see better. Margaret placed flowers on the grave, her hand steady. I'm sorry, Robert. I'm sorry it took losing almost everything for me to understand what you were trying to teach me. You were right about all of it. She turned to Daniel. Your father left you that trust fund because he knew I'd try to control you with money. He was protecting you from me. I hated him for it at first. Now I'm grateful. You built something real because you had freedom. That's what he wanted. Daniel put his arm around his mother, a gesture that would have been impossible 2 years ago. He wanted both of us to be happy, Mom. In different ways, maybe, but he loved us both. He loved you better, Margaret said quietly. He loved you without conditions or strings. I'm learning how to do that now. Better late than never. We walked back to the cars together, Claire holding both her grandmother's hand and mine. The little girl chattered about the flowers, the birds, the clouds, seeing beauty in everything the way children do, the way Robert had tried to teach us to see. At the car, Margaret hugged me tightly. Thank you, Sarah. For not giving up on me, for giving me this chance. Robert was right about you too, he said you saw clearly what others missed. You saw that I could change, even when I didn't believe it myself. I hugged her back, feeling the genuine warmth that had been missing before. People can always change if they want to badly enough. You wanted to. We drove home separately but planned to meet for dinner, a weekly tradition we'd established. Margaret in her modest Westchester condo, us in our comfortable house, building something that wasn't about money or status, but about genuine connection. That evening, after Claire was asleep, Daniel and I sat on our porch watching the sunset. Dad would be happy, he said. About Mom changing, about us being okay, about Claire. All of it. He knew exactly what he was doing with that trust fund. It wasn't just about giving you money, it was about forcing everyone to confront what really mattered. I leaned against him. He orchestrated all of this from beyond the grave. Daniel laughed softly. Classic Dad. Always thinking 10 steps ahead. Inside, on our mantel, sat a photo of Robert holding baby Daniel, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. Beside it was a photo of Daniel holding Claire in the same way, the same joy captured across generations. The trust fund had given us financial security, we'd paid off debts, bought our house, secured Claire's education. But Robert's real gift was the clarity that came from having resources without strings attached. Freedom to choose values over wealth, relationships over status, authenticity over appearance. Margaret's attempted betrayal had paradoxically become the catalyst for everyone's growth. Her greed had exposed fault lines that needed addressing. Her eventual change proved that even the most materialistic people could learn what actually mattered. "I'm going to write Claire a letter," Daniel said suddenly. "Like Dad wrote me." Explaining all of this, the trust fund, why it mattered, what I learned. "So when she's older, she'll understand that wealth is a tool, not a goal. That relationships are the real treasure." "That's perfect," I agreed. "She'll need that reminder. This world makes it easy to forget." We'd use Robert's gift wisely, not just the money, but the lessons that came with it. We'd teach Claire that generosity matters more than accumulation, that integrity outlasts wealth, that family relationships built on honesty were worth more than any inheritance. The hidden safe and secret trust fund document had revealed Margaret's greed, yes. But they'd also revealed Robert's profound love, his deep understanding of what his family needed, and his faith that truth would eventually prevail over deception. Margaret had refused to share the inheritance money, thinking she could hide the trust forever. Instead, her attempted betrayal had forced everyone to examine their values, to choose what kind of people they wanted to be, to build relationships based on something more solid than money. In the end, Robert had given us exactly what he'd intended, not just financial security, but freedom. Freedom to live authentically, love generously, and build a legacy measured not in dollars but in relationships, integrity, and the values we pass to the next generation. Claire would grow up knowing her grandfather through stories, through the security his planning provided, and through the example her father set, an example Robert had modeled first. The money was just a tool. The real inheritance was love, wisdom, and the courage to choose what truly mattered. That was worth far more than $1.5 million. That was priceless. And Margaret, having finally learned that lesson herself, would get to be part of Claire's life after all. Not because of money or obligation, but because she'd done the work to become someone worthy of the relationship. Robert would have been proud of all of us, Daniel for standing firm, me for seeing clearly, Margaret for finding the courage to change, and Claire for being the catalyst that brought healing. The hidden safe had held more than documents. It had held truth, protection, and ultimately, the key to everyone's freedom. And we were all finally, genuinely free.